Hey, it's the Rockin' Rebel live and in living color, and you're listening to That Way Cool Wrestling Show.
Hello and welcome to That Way Cool Wrestling Show. My name is Danny J, along with my great guests, Charles Gemini Gregory, LeGrande Onslaught Jackson, and the Madman Mark Lindsay. Welcome to the show, everybody. Remember, check us out at thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com and on Facebook at That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Also, if you guys like the show, please share it, like the pages. The more people to watch it, the more shows we can put out for you. And we want to hear from you as well. So make sure you contact us and let us know what you want to hear here on the show. Thanks for that.
Wait, just get to the thing. Buy our shirts.
Buy our shirts.
All right.
Thank you.
Go ahead, man.
Thank you. Today, we got a great show. We're going to talk about factions. Factions, groups of wrestlers that got together to form an army of sorts to combat either the good guys or the bad guys, depending on which side of the tracks they fell on, and what kind of controversy they drove up from getting together. There's a lot of different factions that are running around in all the different federations. First of all, let's talk about what's some of the greatest factions of all time. Mark, let's go with you as a fan.
Sure. You know, there are lots of people, there are obvious answers to this, and everyone goes to their one favorite. You almost have to start with what, in my opinion, is one of the originals, which is the Four Horsemen. You know, being a wrestling fan, watching wrestling in the early to mid 80s, you had the original of Ole, Arn, Tully, and Rick. My favorite group was with Barry.
Yes,
Barry Windham.
mine as well. Yes.
They had all four titles. But it's more so than just the faction. It's who they wrestled. You know, the Dusties, the Stings, the Lugers, the Road Warriors, the Nikitas. You just have so much energy and excitement, and it was because you either were like me and you wanted to pay to see them get their butts kicked, or you wanted to pay to see them because you loved them.
Yeah.
And, you know, at that age...
or you didn't want to admit that you loved them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's kind of how it was. Yeah. You know, off camera, we talked about how I had to root for the bad guys, you know, and I changed as a person when my favorite wrestler turned heel. So here we are. I'm going to the matches to watch the Horsemen because I like them, and I also want to see them get their butts kicked, and that just brought so much energy and passion.
What do you think, LeGrande?
Meh. Meh. No, but seriously. One of my favorite factions, I have to have a bunch of them. Doom. I call them a faction because basically you had two strong personalities brought together by another strong personality.
True.
And whether you like it or not, they influenced a lot in that company by being who they were.
Right. Were you talking Woman or Teddy Long that was brought them together?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
Woman had her own little thing.
Right.
She was the beauty to the beast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
You know? So, Woman had that je ne sais quoi.
Is she still alive?
Who?
Woman?
Oh, man.
No.
We need to edit that.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm thinking...
You're thinking who Woman was.
Yeah, I got lost, and I have to apologize. I didn't try to be a funny jackass, but I got lost for a second.
No, but unfortunately, no, she is not with us any longer.
And I do apologize. I don't want to hear no emails and none of that. It's an accident.
We do apologize.
Yeah, but I'm sorry.
Woman was the beauty to the beast. Kind of like Baby Doll and all the other young ladies back in the day who used to bring together these big hulking men. Then you have... But you know what? I would take it a step further. Because with Doom, Doom was the predecessor to the Nation of Domination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know what? You would never have thought about it back then.
But you also...
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Ron Simonson was in the Nation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
He was supposed to be the mouthpiece, but The Rock just took over.
Well...
And originally, I'm pretty sure that's how they wanted.
Yeah.
But The Rock was so charismatic that he just...
Yeah, how could you not hand him the mic?
Right. How could you not give him the mic?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, you had the Nation of Domination, which was beginning, and I like Dangerous Alliance.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
I was a big fan of the Dangerous Alliance.
Yeah. And I think if there was ever... You talked about back in another episode when we talked about tag teams, and we said, like, you know, the benchmark were the Road Warriors and stuff like that. in factions, you know, you have a benchmark in those years, which were the Four Horsemen. I would say, and the Dangerous Alliance, much like we said, the Steiners to the Road Warriors, that was the faction, in my opinion, that was something equal to the Horsemen, because it was a collection of guys who maintain. And here's the deal: maintained their individuality. Okay,
Exactly.
They weren't branded. Okay, they weren't like everybody wore the symbol of the faction or whatever the case was. You know, you had Steve Austin, you had Bobby, and you had Larry Zbyszko, you had Arn Anderson. You know, everybody individual, and not one of them were, you know, this group. They were their individuals that hung together. And someone told me, and in fact, I was watching a Ric Flair and Four Horsemen interview, and J.J. Dillon got on there and he said, basically, this is a collection of individuals who form together as a unit, and that in itself describes to me a faction. You know, someone, or at least a successful one, because you're dealing with guys that, for the collective, they do their thing, but they're not lost in the branding. And I'll get into this a little bit more with the Horsemen, because there were so many different versions.
I mean, we're all
of
going to
Horsemen,
talk about factions, and there's no doubt the greatest faction of all time was the Four Horsemen. That's bottom line. Okay, but there's a lot of factions out there that did just amazing work. You talked about the Nation. I got both sides of the spectrum. I love the Freebirds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Freebirds, Michael Hayes. They had the three types. They had the charismatic, they had the power man, and then they had
the Mike.
Yeah, the Mike.
Buddy
So you had boom, boom, boom. But you can also go to, people don't think of as factions. That was incredible. Was the Oddities.
I don't know. Oh, come on now. You're
Wait a minute, time out. No,
I
wait a minute.
understand where he's going with
But I'm
this.
going
Go
with
ahead.
that. When you went to a show and the Oddities came out, what did you do?
I laughed.
You were going, you were jumping
You
around.
were dancing
No,
like a
I wasn't.
jackass.
No, I'm not lying.
Mark was
I
totally
could not
dancing.
stand it.
Mark, you were 2 seats in front of me because we hit you with Junior Beats. I'm just saying, you had the Brood, guys like that. It was just, to me, like, those individuals brought that, like, that thing to you.
Right.
What was the one? What's his name? Had
Kevin
Ted
Sullivan?
DiBiase. Ted DiBiase had the faction, the Money
corporation.
Money Incorporated. Was
Yeah,
it?
Money Incorporated. Yeah,
Things like that with
IRS.
IRS and all that.
Nikolai Volkov.
You
Right
sit there
to censor.
and you sit there and you're like, this is great. These were great wrestlers that can carry themselves. It didn't matter. Just like the Horsemen, they didn't need the Horsemen.
Go back to the Oddities, though. Who was
Oddities-
great in the Oddities?
Listen, but you're saying great.
But see-
They were entertaining. The Oddities, when they came out to that ring, if you watched the crowd,
Every
they were
child.
all about the Oddities at that point.
Yeah, Luna Vachon.
I agree. I agree with you,
Like,
but I
we
did
all know
not
the
like that.
We all know the Giant Golga couldn't
Luna was
wrestle
in
for
it.
God
human
rest-
beings.
Yeah.
God rest Luna's
but
soul.
Yeah.
that group was entertaining.
But when you
The
say that,
Spirit Squad,
when you say it though,
entertaining.
if a group and I'm a DJ as well, so I mean there's an entertainment factor, and one thing that any entertainer knows, that if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing successfully, is that you drive some sort of emotion out of somebody. Okay, as a DJ, if I don't have a dance floor going, but I see somebody tapping their foot, I'm connecting to that person, to this person. Same thing with wrestling. They might not be a great collection of people, but if you're sitting there like, ha ha ha, laughing every time they come out, they're driving a response out of you. If you're sitting there looking at it like, I can't wait for the next segment, then you got a point where you're saying, all right, move it on. This is not working. But they're getting a response out of you. And I think that's what it's making them go over.
Look, I don't disagree. I mean, obviously that's your opinion, and I don't want to get chokeslammed through this table. But I will say that you mentioned the Oddities in the same breath as the Four Horsemen, and the Nation.
That's your problem. You're thinking that's why on this segment, on all the segments, you're smart, Mark.
Of course.
Okay, some of the greatest factions to me, the Job Squad.
Well, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Job Squad, aka the Blue World Order,
Right, yeah.
aka some of the greatest guys you ever want to deal with.
The Blue Meanie, when the Blue Meanie, look, we were talking other segments and I didn't mention them and I don't want to call them that, but as a jobber, that he put his heart every match and everyone. You love the Meanie. The Meanie was a man.
Yep.
You love the Blue Meanie with those short ass shorts on. You know what I mean? The ham shirt.
Doing the truffle shuffle.
But he was the Blue Meanie. The Blue Meanie, him. When they came out, you were extremely happy. Even when
Entertained. Yeah.
entertained. Just factions, the Dudleys. Bubba.
Yeah, a lot of people don't
Big
realize.
Dick, Chubby.
Yes.
Big Dick.
Dances with
Sign guy.
Sign
Dances
guy.
with Dudley.
Wait a minute. And the one, Spike. Spike Dudley. The Dudleys, they made that.
I forgot one of
work.
the famous ones.
The sign guy always sat there and had what, a sandwich in his mouth? You know what I mean? That worked. You don't have to be the Four Horsemen to be a faction, a great faction. There was several. We were talking about the Natural Born Thrillers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All those guys on their own were incredible talents. They were incredible talents. I don't think they got the right push, but they were incredible talents.
They came at the wrong time.
They came at the wrong time. I think actually they were kind of before their time.
Yeah.
And they were to get
You know
technical.
what? And we kind of touched on it, and I'm going to touch on it briefly because I'm trying to go into this other faction. With the Horsemen, things happen. Like we said, and mine too. My favorite version of the Horsemen was Rick, Arn, Tully, and Barry Windham. That was my favorite.
Yes.
That was the most functional
Yes.
version of that team.
Yes.
Okay, once things kind of got there's a few years involved and people going back and forth between feds, and then they come back in, and long story short, Tully's not involved anymore.
Fails the drug test.
Okay, he's not involved. He can't get on there. It proved how crucial Tully was.
Yep.
Okay, because everybody thinks Rick, but it proves how crucial Tully was because they could never replace him
Right, yep.
at all. And they almost did, and this was at the end of the Horseman's reign, and I'll get to that in a second, but you had guys like Sid, who by himself was, okay, it can be a person that can
But
be
not
marketed,
Horseman
but
material.
not Horseman material. You got Pillman, who's a great talent,
Don't even mention Paul Roma, please.
but I don't think. Well, here's the thing with Paul Roma, and understand that Paul Roma was right around the same time they tried to do the Shockmaster. So there was a lot of writing thing. You can't blame Paul Roma
No.
for the Horseman thing.
No, you
But
wouldn't.
Paul Roma wasn't a Horseman, but Paul Roma could have came in as an individual heel and did great because when he was with Paul Orndorff and they did pretty wonderful, he blew up and he was fantastic because the guy was a legit worker that would look good. He was able to work. Boom, done. You know, forget about backstage what he's like. You know, now you get now Benoit, who was a great talent, and probably and Dean Malenko.
Right.
Okay. Now
One
I'm
of the
skipping.
most underrated guys ever.
Now
Dean Malenko.
now you're going to get guys like Steve McMichaels in there and stuff, and like it's like they were trying their
But it shouldn't
hardest.
have been. Let's go back to that, Steve.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have been there.
Shouldn't
So
have
I'll
been there
say
at
it.
all.
Go
No,
ahead.
no, and he shouldn't have been. Honestly,
have
I'll
been
say
there.
it. But you had guys like McMichaels in there and stuff like that. The closest thing they had to good, and there was a sacrifice here, which made me angry in a sense, was when they brought Kurt Hennig in. Because if anybody was worthy of being a Four Horsemen,
It was.
My
it
spot.
was Kurt Hennig.
It's got my spot.
Okay? But Kurt Hennig, it should have been Kurt Hennig, Barry Windham, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair.
Yes.
That Kurt Hennig could have filled Tully's spot.
Yes.
Okay? Nobody else could fill Tully's
His own
spot.
mannerisms, he could. Yes.
He was a horseman. And now going into that, the closest thing I saw in WCW at that time that had potential of doing that was Revolution. Do you remember Revolution, which
Oh,
was Shane Douglas,
Yep.
Harry
Saturn.
Saturn,
Oh wow.
Dean Malenko, and Chris
And
Benoit?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They were potentially, I'm like, this is something. Because unfortunately, as a Horseman fan, I'm always looking for a Horseman. I find myself in it. World Wrestling Entertainment came in and they brought us Evolution, which was close. Which was close.
But it was too much of a Four Horsemen thing. They were
Right.
pushing it to the point where it was
Yeah.
entirely too much. It had none. It didn't have its own characteristics. They were just
Well,
trying to be the Four Horsemen.
Because if you want to think about it, the closest thing that came to the Shane Douglas faction was the Legacy.
Yes.
Because you had young, hungry, strong, fast guys who were ready to go at all times and get it. They already had established names,
Yes.
you know, for the most part. They already had established backstories. They already came from wrestling families, but they were doing it for themselves. They really wanted to be there. They wanted to. Yeah, you know our fathers, you know our brothers, you know, but this is who we are, and we're going to show you that we deserve to be here.
But we're talking about all these factions, and there's things that we're getting away from, and one that comes to mind, two. NWO, before they start adding on all these jerk-offs. The original NWO. And when Aces and Eights came out, the originals, when they start adding too much, they killed the gimmick.
Well,
no doubt. Because NWO,
and that gets me to, and I was about to say,
they try to put too much into it.
And then they broke off.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but now this is going to cut into DX on the other side at the same time, and NWO. And I gotta honestly say, though, from a fan standpoint, NWO became more of a storyline than a faction.
Right? Yep.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to me. I mean, the DX, the guy, you weren't waiting to see who else was going to join DX.
Right.
DX was DX, and whoever was there unless they got fired. You know, but whoever was there, and that was it. And it was like, what's DX going to do next? Which is like, what was a Horseman going to do next? Whereas in NWO, it wasn't so much. You got over once you got over the three of those guys getting together
Hogan
with the Hogan turn, because really the NWO was the Hogan turn.
Yes.
It wasn't the NWO. Because the outsiders coming in were like, all right, okay, cool, you had another tag team's here. When you really think about it, you know, I mean, it was big news.
But even when they used to come out before, you didn't know who they were, and they were saying the boss. I have to admit, for a while, I didn't think it was going to be Hulk Hogan.
No, that was the greatest
That's the
turn
last
of
thing I
all
thought.
time.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the last thing I ever thought.
One of the best swerves in the business.
Never thought.
but it's a storyline to me, because now you're talking about, you had heels and faces banding together against this common foe, okay? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, or whatever you want to say, you know. And now you got like guys like Faces of Fear, you know, teaming up with the Steiners to try and fight the NWO, because they're jumping people in the back, and you're worried about who is going to be joining the NWO, because you had this one did, oh that one did, oh this one did, and it became a story more about, oh my God, who's going to join them next? Not what are they going to do, because they weren't really, when you think of it, they weren't doing anything.
It was just, to me, it was just too many of them.
And a lot of the
way
factions,
too many of them.
Way too many.
Yeah.
a lot of the factions that we were all talking about, other than the Horsemen, of course, they weren't really managed by anybody. Like you could have stables, like Devastation Incorporated, back in World Class.
Yeah.
You had the Slicks, the Bobby Heenans, all these guys had
Kevin
stables.
Sullivan.
Right.
Kevin
Varsity
Sullivan,
Club.
right.
Yeah.
So you had all these.
Yeah, which was a lot
were-
better than Dungeon of Doom.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
We had believable talent. So, like, you had stables, but the factions, I think the 90s, that whole alternative, you know, the grunge era, the timing of
Yeah.
the NWO and DX made them more gang. I hate to say that word.
But you're right.
But just saying,
Yeah.
hey, but like, all right, we're saying timing. And if you think about it now, when the Brood came out,
Yeah.
Right?
the timing was
Cutting
just
edge.
wrong.
Yeah.
That timing was just wrong. Because when they used to come up in that ring of fire, that
Awesome.
was so over.
It was awesome to
They were
watch.
before their time.
But then it goes back again to guys in the back being jealous.
Yep.
You know, if I'm not getting off subject, but when he used to come out the elephant's head all the time.
Vader?
Vader. I don't know what's wrong with you folks. I'm sorry.
Chair shots hurt.
But yeah, Vader. Remember, he was not where because Hogan was complaining
Right.
that he's using a prop. It wasn't a prop. That was the greatest thing we ever seen.
To see that mastodon
Smell the
shooting the
mustard.
smoke.
That was the
and-
greatest thing
oh,
we've ever
my
seen.
God.
But that goes back to the whole, like I said before, jealousy, this, that. But we're not gonna get into that. We're talking about
Yeah.
factions. But some of those factions that could have been here, people were afraid of. They're getting all, oh man, they're getting all the heat. Oh, they're getting all the pops, which is bull. Wrestling's wrestling. If it works for them, it works for them.
Well, how many factions created other storylines? You know, you had the NWO members getting kicked out. You had Luger getting kicked out of the Horsemen because he didn't want a job to the Bunkhouse Stampede. And that created a feud, Luger versus Flair.
Right.
So, you know, you had all
You
these...
see, that was tight though. It was tight.
Tight.
Right.
It was close knit, And it was like, oh my God, the faction that's indestructible, the Horsemen, is imploding from inside. All these people are trying to down the Horsemen, and what's happening? They're downing themselves. That's a story turn.
Well, and the NWO, would have the giant gets kicked out, and now then you have the politics, whether it's real life or stage. You're having these internal conflicts, and that
you know what? Like a lot of people they'll sit there and say like, "Oh well, in the Horsemen, having Benoit and Malenko in there, that was one of the great things." Yes and no. Talent-wise, yes, especially Malenko. Benoit, who was one of the greatest talents, period. He wasn't good on the mic, which every Horseman was. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, every horse, including Barry Windham and Ole Yaner, every good horseman was good on the mic, was a mic man, okay? Benoit wasn't. Benoit really needed a manager, really, because he was like a guy you set loose, like a dog, cut off the chain and say, go get him, And Malenko didn't talk much, but Malenko had that error about him, where like,
it seemed like it was arrogance, but it wasn't. It was just positivity.
Right? Yeah,
he knew what he could do.
He knew what he could do, and it was like
didn't care,
and that was much like a Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson did. Like I don't need to.
You look at Tully. Tully didn't have an opposing body.
No.
But Tully get in there and whoop your ass.
The Brainbusters would come in.
And how about when they came out? Did they do any of this?
No,
did they do that?
They came out.
They walked to the ring. They strutted without any kind of flamboyance to it. They strut to the ring, walk in, I'm doing my job, and I'm leaving. That's how badass I am. Yeah. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. Benoit Malenko, they go in there, including Steve McMichaels, and now they're getting branded with this Four Horsemen logo and shit like that. And they're making them like a team, but not so much a faction.
Right.
They lost their individuality because they became part of a combined unit. Think of the Borg.
They got branded.
Yeah, they were branded though, and I'm like, that to me lost it. Like I would never want, and they did it with Paul Roma. Paul Roma was the only guy that wore something Horseman
all the time
on his fights.
You know what? You just love Paul Roma.
I'll give the man his props. I mean, what the hell,
Look at
power and glory.
I just want to say one thing, from earlier comments, guys. We're gonna wrap. I understand it's almost time to wrap it up. I made a comment earlier, and I had a brain fart. And I was talking about women, it's no disrespect. I just went totally blank. One of the greatest talents in wrestling, unfortunate what happened to her. So please don't write the show giving them a hard time.
Yes.
I totally had a brain fart. I just went totally blank for some reason. Because we're talking about so many things, and so I have to apologize to anyone out there. And if you really know me, I've been in this business a long time with no sign of disrespect. And if you take it too far, some of you guys are just ridiculous. You can kiss my ass. All right.
And with that being said, that's a good final thought. That was very Springer-like, wasn't it? Well, we can go on. Like I said, factions. I think, and just to throw one in there, Fortune, which was another potential that got lost.
They lost it. There's known for too many good things. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, But
Ministry, you got the Ministry of Darkness. Without them, we'd have no APA. I'm just saying.
But then you had corporate ministry.
But
and see, then that's what happens. Writing gets involved.
Y'all forgot about the Himalaya players.
Whoa!
Love you guys. Love you, James, Ron, Aaron. I love y'all.
I hope you're watching.
I hope you're watching. Hope to see y'all soon. I'm giving y'all a hard time because I love you.
Guys, this has been a great show. Join us next time. Make sure you're at thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com. That Way Cool Wrestling Show on Facebook, and as always, share. The more people to watch it, the more we can do with these shows. We do appreciate it. For all these guys here, my name is Danny J. We'll see you at the matches. Bye, everybody.
I hope Paul Roma's watching.
Did you see his face? I said, you just got something with Paul Roma.